It all started with a dream that seemed completely unattainable at the time. I was a 23-year-old recent college graduate living in a small, rundown apartment in a city where everyone seemed to have their act together. I had a degree in business management, but no real experience in running anything, and I was unsure of what my next step should be. I remember sitting in front of my laptop late one night, scrolling through social media, seeing all these successful entrepreneurs who had somehow cracked the code to wealth and success. I thought, why can't I do that? I had grown up in a modest household. My parents worked hard to provide for my siblings and me, but there was never much extra. The idea of starting my own business seemed so foreign. I didn't have investors, a network of powerful contacts, or any insight into how to get started. But there was one thing I did have, an unshakable determination. After a few days of self-doubt and anxiety, I came across an article that changed everything for me. It was about a young woman who had turned a small idea into a thriving online business. She didn't have a degree in anything related to tech or marketing. She had simply identified a gap in the market and leveraged her creativity to fill it. That was the moment it clicked. I didn't need a fancy degree or millions of dollars to get started. I just needed an idea and the drive to make it happen. So, I decided to go for it. My first idea came from something I had always been passionate about: fitness. I'd spent years trying different workout programs and supplements, always looking for the perfect regimen. One thing that bothered me, though, was the lack of quality workout gear available for people who were just starting their fitness journey. Everything out there seemed either overpriced or designed for fitness experts, not beginners. That was my opening. I decided to create an affordable, high-quality line of workout gear for beginners. I spent the next couple of months obsessively researching materials, working with manufacturers, and testing out designs. The process was overwhelming at first. I had no prior experience in product design or manufacturing, so I was learning everything from scratch. I quickly realized that it wasn't just about having a great product, it was about understanding the business side, too. How would I market this? How would I build a brand that stood out? With limited funds and no experience in digital marketing, I turned to social media to promote my products. I started small, creating Instagram and Facebook pages where I would post workout tips, motivational quotes, and sneak peeks of my gear. The first few months were brutal. I had very few followers, and the sales trickled in slowly, if at all. But every time someone purchased a product, I felt a rush. It was like I had created something that mattered, even if it was just to one person. But then, after about 6 months of posting consistently and refining my product offerings, something started to shift. I got a message from a fitness influencer with a decent following. She told me she loved my workout gear and wanted to promote it to her audience. I couldn't believe it. I had been working so hard and trying to get noticed, and now this was happening. I sent her a free sample, and within days, her followers were reaching out to me, wanting to buy the gear she had showcased. That moment was the turning point. From that point onward, things started to snowball. More influencers started promoting my products, and my social media following grew exponentially. I invested every penny I made back into the business, upgrading the website, expanding the product line, and launching targeted ads. By the end of the first year, I had a small but steady stream of revenue coming in. However, I wasn't prepared for the challenges that would come next. As the business grew, so did the demand. The pressure to maintain product quality while scaling was immense. My first batch of inventory was a nightmare. The supplier had misinterpreted my design specs, and the material used for the gear was subpar. I had to spend countless hours fixing the issue, reaching out to customers to offer refunds or replacements. It was one of the lowest points of my journey. I questioned whether I was cut out for this whole entrepreneur thing, but I wasn't ready to give up. I found a new supplier who was able to meet my quality standards, and I improved my quality control process. From then on, I focused on building stronger relationships with my customers. I started a loyalty program, offered free online fitness classes, and asked for feedback on how I could improve. The personal connection with my customers became the heart of the brand, and it set me apart from other companies in the industry. 2 years in, I had expanded the business beyond just workout gear. I added nutrition products, fitness accessories, and even launched an online coaching service. The brand was growing faster than I had ever imagined, but I still felt like there was something missing. I realized I had built a business, but not a legacy. I wanted my brand to stand for more than just profit. So, I decided to start a foundation dedicated to providing free fitness and nutrition resources to underserved communities. The goal was to make fitness accessible to everyone, no matter their background or income level. The foundation was a huge success, and it opened doors to collaborations with local gyms, schools, and wellness centers. Suddenly, my business wasn't just about selling products, it was about making a difference in people's lives. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. What started as a small idea in my cramped apartment has turned into a multi-million-dollar brand with a strong community of loyal customers. The journey has been far from easy. There were days when I felt like giving up, moments when I doubted my ability to keep going. But each challenge was a lesson, and each failure pushed me closer to success. The most important lesson I've learned is that being an entrepreneur isn't about having the perfect idea or a foolproof plan. It's about persistence and the willingness to learn from mistakes. I still don't have it all figured out, but I now understand that the only thing standing between me and success was my willingness to try. To anyone who's thinking about starting their own business, go for it. Don't let fear hold you back. You don't need all the answers right now. You just need the courage to take that first step and the resilience to keep moving forward even when things get tough. The road is never smooth, but the view from the top is worth every bump along the way. I'm not sure where the future will take me, but I know one thing for sure. I'll be ready for whatever comes next. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. A few years ago, I found myself in a place that most entrepreneurs fear. I had no idea what I was doing. I had just launched my first business, a small online clothing brand. It was one of those ideas that sounded fantastic in my head, trendy, sustainable, and just what the world needed. But in reality, I had no experience in fashion, business, or e-commerce. All I had was an old laptop, a handful of savings, and a dream. I was fresh out of college and thought I had it all figured out. I'd been a marketing major, so I knew all about SEO, branding, and customer engagement, right? Wrong. I didn't realize how much more went into actually running a business. At first, I tried to learn everything as I went, researching things like how to set up a website, how to source materials, and how to handle logistics. Each challenge felt like a mountain, and I often found myself questioning whether I was even cut out for this. The first mistake I made was choosing a niche that I didn't fully understand. I was passionate about sustainable fashion, but I didn't realize how much time, money, and expertise was required to bring eco-friendly clothing to market. It wasn't just about finding the right fabric. It was about understanding supply chains, production costs, and managing relationships with suppliers. I naively thought that because I cared about the environment, others would automatically care about it too, and that they'd be willing to pay more for a product with a green label. But that wasn't the case at all. My first few months were a complete disaster. I spent thousands on inventory that no one wanted to buy. I tried running ads on Instagram and Facebook, hoping to drive traffic to my site, but my sales barely covered my operating costs. There were days when I thought I might have to give up altogether. I found myself living off ramen noodles, frantically reworking my business model, and trying to come up with some sort of strategy that could turn things around. One of the biggest challenges I faced was finding my target audience. I spent way too much time trying to cater to everyone. I figured that if I made my clothing for everyone, then everyone would buy it. But what I soon realized was that by trying to appeal to the masses, I wasn't speaking to anyone in particular. I didn't know my customer, and my brand didn't resonate with anyone. Then one day, after yet another sleepless night, I decided to do something different. Instead of guessing what people wanted, I started listening. I reached out to my few followers on social media and asked them about their experiences with sustainable fashion. I didn't just want to hear what they thought of my clothes. I wanted to know what was important to them, what they struggled with when it came to eco-friendly fashion, and what they were looking for in a clothing brand. The feedback I received was eye-opening. People were tired of being bombarded with greenwashing and were looking for authenticity. They wanted transparency, they wanted to know where their clothes came from, and they wanted to support brands that were genuinely making an impact. I realized that I had been focusing too much on the product itself and not enough on the story behind it. People didn't just want sustainable clothes. They wanted to feel like they were part of something bigger than themselves. So I pivoted. I scrapped my original business plan and started over. I took a step back and completely rebranded my company. I created a new mission statement, Sustainability through transparency. I started sourcing materials from local artisans and small businesses that had a proven track record of ethical practices. Instead of trying to compete with the big players in the industry, I focused on creating a small, community-driven brand that people could feel proud to support. I also realized that I needed to stop trying to do everything myself. I began collaborating with influencers and other brands that shared my values. The partnership model was key to getting my brand in front of a larger audience. I had to remind myself that there was no shame in seeking help or admitting that I didn't know everything. Surrounding myself with people who were experts in their respective fields helped me to understand the nuances of running a business in a way that I never could have on my own. The growth was slow at first, but steady. I was finally seeing the fruits of my labor. We went from making a handful of sales a week to getting orders every day. People started to share photos of themselves wearing my clothes, tagging the brand, and posting about it online. I started getting direct messages from customers telling me how much they appreciated the transparency and how they felt like they were supporting a company that truly cared about the environment. One of the most pivotal moments in the business's growth came when I decided to start a blog. It wasn't just about selling clothes anymore. It was about creating content that resonated with my audience. I wrote about sustainability, the challenges of running a business, and how to live a more eco-friendly lifestyle. It turned out that people wanted to learn. They wanted tips and inspiration. My website became more than just an e-commerce site. It became a resource for those who shared my values. I also realized that the numbers weren't everything. Of course, sales were important, but what really mattered was the relationships I was building. I started engaging with my followers on a deeper level. I responded to every message, every comment, and even started hosting small virtual events where people could learn more about sustainable fashion. Building a community around the brand became my primary focus. As the business grew, so did my confidence. I was no longer the clueless entrepreneur trying to figure it out as I went. I had learned that success didn't come from trying to force a product into the market. It came from understanding the market and listening to your customers. I realized that entrepreneurship wasn't just about selling something. It was about solving a problem and providing value. Fast forward to today, and my brand is no longer a small startup. We've expanded, and we've even begun to collaborate with larger companies in the industry. But the core of the brand remains the same: sustainability, transparency, and authenticity. My team has grown, and I now have employees who share my passion for making a difference. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far we've come. There were so many times I doubted myself, so many moments when I thought about quitting. But every failure, every mistake, and every setback taught me something invaluable. If there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone starting a business, it's this: listen to your customers, be authentic, and never be afraid to pivot when things aren't working. It's not about getting everything right from the start. It's about learning, growing, and adapting. And now, when people ask me what my biggest challenge was, I always say the same thing. The biggest challenge was believing that I could succeed. I was never supposed to be an entrepreneur. In fact, my childhood was full of talk about stable jobs, steady paychecks, and living a quiet, predictable life. But I wasn't satisfied with that path. I wanted more. I wanted to build something from scratch, something I could truly call my own. It wasn't an easy journey, and there were plenty of failures along the way, but looking back, it's all been worth it. Let me take you back to the beginning. Growing up, I was always the creative one in my family. I was the kid who loved to build things, design things, and always had some kind of project going on. But my parents were both accountants, and they valued stability. Their idea of success was working for a big corporation, having benefits, and knowing exactly what your paycheck would look like each month. So when I went to college, I tried to fit that mold. I enrolled in business school, figuring that if I was going to make it in life, this was the way to do it. I studied marketing, finance, and management. I spent long nights cramming for exams and working internships that taught me how businesses worked from the inside. But despite the theoretical knowledge, I always felt like something was missing. I was learning to be a cog in someone else's machine, not how to build my own. It wasn't until I graduated and landed a well-paying job at a tech startup that I realized just how much I hated the idea of working for someone else. I was 22, fresh out of college, and full of ambition. But the corporate grind crushed my spirit. I hated the rigid schedules, the micromanaging, and the never-ending meetings that always seemed to lead nowhere. After a year, I decided to quit. Everyone thought I was crazy, and honestly, I thought I was crazy too. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something that felt more meaningful. So, I started small. I had always been passionate about photography, so I thought I could turn that into a side hustle. I started by offering photography services for local events, weddings, parties, corporate events, you name it. I didn't have much equipment at first, just a camera I bought with the last of my savings and a basic editing software, but I was determined to make it work. In the beginning, it was tough. The first few months were slow. I didn't have much of a network, and I had no idea how to market myself. But I kept pushing. I reached out to local event planners, attended networking events, and posted my work on social media. Slowly, I started to get clients, and each job I did made me a little better at my craft. But here's the thing. I realized pretty quickly that the photography business, while fun, wasn't going to make me the kind of money I wanted to build something big. So, I started thinking bigger. I was inspired by all these incredible entrepreneurs I followed online, people who had turned small ideas into multi-million-dollar businesses. I knew I had to take a risk if I was ever going to achieve the kind of success they had. I thought about what I could bring to the table that was different from what anyone else was doing. I started to realize that there was a gap in the market for high-quality, affordable digital marketing services for small businesses. Many of the small businesses I worked with for photography had terrible websites, no social media presence, and no real strategy for growing their brands. They were spending money on marketing that didn't actually help them. That's when I had the idea, why not create a digital marketing agency that specialized in helping small businesses thrive in the online world? I could use my marketing knowledge from college, my experience as a photographer, and my desire to help people build something amazing. I knew it would be hard, but I was ready. The first step was figuring out how to actually get clients. At this point, I had barely any capital, no team, and not much experience with running a full-fledged agency. But I had a lot of passion and determination. I began by offering my services for free or at a steep discount to local businesses in exchange for testimonials and referrals. I knew that if I could prove my worth, the clients would start coming in. It worked. Slowly but surely, I built a small portfolio and began charging more for my services. I focused on results, on helping small businesses grow and reach new customers through SEO, social media marketing, and paid advertising. My clients were happy with the results, and word of mouth started to spread. But even though things were improving, I wasn't out of the woods yet. My next big challenge came when I had to decide whether to scale up. I knew that if I kept going at my current pace, I could make a comfortable living, but I didn't want comfort, I wanted growth. So, I took the leap and hired my first employee, a talented marketing strategist who could help me handle more clients. It was a huge risk, but it paid off. We started taking on bigger projects and bringing in more revenue. Things really started to take off once we began focusing on automation and efficiency. We invested in software tools that streamlined the process of managing clients, scheduling content, and running campaigns. This allowed us to take on more clients without sacrificing quality. We were able to charge higher fees for more comprehensive services, and our reputation continued to grow. A couple of years later, we expanded our team and added even more services to our offerings. We went from a two-person operation to a full-fledged agency with multiple departments, content creation, SEO, social media, paid ads, and more. We even started offering consulting services for businesses looking to build their own in-house marketing teams. Looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. What started as a small side hustle with a camera and a few $100s in the bank turned into a multi-million-dollar agency. I have a team of incredibly talented people, and we work with clients all over the world. But the journey wasn't easy. There were times when I thought about giving up, when the financial pressures seemed too much, or when I felt overwhelmed by the amount of work. But I kept going, and I'm so glad I did. If there's one thing I've learned from my journey, it's this. You don't have to have all the answers at the start. You just need to take that first step and be willing to learn and adapt along the way. And most importantly, never underestimate the power of hard work and persistence. It's not easy, but if you keep at it, you'll eventually get to where you want to be. I'm not saying I'm done yet. The journey is ongoing, and there are always new challenges to overcome. But every day, I wake up excited to continue building, learning, and growing. And that's something I would never trade for a stable paycheck and a 9-to-5 job. So, if you're sitting on an idea or dreaming of starting your own business, my advice to you is simple. Go for it. Take the leap. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it might never come. Build your dreams while you're still figuring things out. The road may be tough, but it will be worth it. I never thought I'd be where I am today, owning a successful business, traveling the world, and speaking to audiences about entrepreneurship. But the road to get here was anything but easy. It all started from a small idea that I never even thought could be a business at first. I was 24 years old and working at a soul-crushing desk job. I hated the office politics, the rigid schedules, and the never-ending bureaucracy. Every day felt like a countdown to 5 p.m., and the only thing that kept me from going completely insane was the idea of one day breaking free. I wanted to do something on my own, something that I was passionate about, but I had no idea what that thing was. One day, on a particularly dull afternoon, I was scrolling through my phone when I stumbled across an article about a guy who made a six-figure income by selling t-shirts online. I was intrigued but skeptical. I mean, how hard could it be to design and sell t-shirts, right? I had a decent sense of humor, so why not? It sounded like a cool side hustle, but I wasn't sure where to start. At the time, I had no real business skills. I wasn't an expert in marketing or design, and I didn't have any money saved up for a large-scale investment. But there was one thing I did have: the internet. I dove into Google, read articles, watched YouTube tutorials, and spent nights researching how to get started with an online store. I decided to start small. I didn't want to sink all my savings into something I wasn't sure about, so I began with a print-on-demand service. This way, I wouldn't have to keep an inventory, and I wouldn't be risking a lot of money up front. I spent a week designing a few simple t-shirts with clever sayings, and I launched my first online store. I didn't expect much, but I figured it was a good place to start. At first, nothing happened. I had no sales. I tried everything I could think of. I posted on social media, joined Facebook groups, and shared the link with friends and family. Still, nothing. But I wasn't discouraged. I had no choice but to keep going. I read more about SEO, social media marketing, and how to optimize my product listings. Slowly but surely, things started to improve. A few weeks into it, I made my first sale. It was a small victory, but it felt like a huge accomplishment. The customer even left a positive review, which encouraged me to keep going. I didn't make much money on that first shirt, but I was hooked. I kept creating more designs, experimenting with different marketing strategies, and learning everything I could about running an online business. The turning point came when I decided to run a Facebook ad campaign. I spent $50 on ads targeting a specific niche group, people who loved sarcastic humor. It was a gamble, but I had nothing to lose. The ad started gaining traction, and within a couple of days, I made 10 sales. I was ecstatic. It wasn't a fortune, but I was making progress. Over the next few months, I continued to optimize my ad campaigns, create new designs, and learn from my mistakes. As my sales grew, I reinvested the money into the business, upgrading my website and running more targeted ads. I also started to build an email list, which was crucial in nurturing customer relationships and promoting new products. By the end of the first year, I had made a decent income from my t-shirt business. It wasn't enough to quit my day job yet, but I was getting close. The real breakthrough came when I launched a limited edition collection of t-shirts based on a viral meme that everyone was talking about at the time. I didn't expect much, but it sold out within 24 hours. I realized I had tapped into something big. That was when I decided to quit my job and focus full-time on my business. I wish I could say that everything was smooth sailing from there, but it wasn't. When you take the leap into entrepreneurship, it's easy to think that success will come quickly, but that's rarely the case. I had to learn how to manage the operations of a growing business, handle customer service issues, deal with shipping delays, and constantly come up with fresh ideas to keep customers engaged. It was a lot of work, and there were many times when I doubted myself. But every challenge was a lesson, and slowly, I began to refine my processes. The next major hurdle came when I realized that I needed to expand beyond t-shirts. I wanted to build a brand, not just sell a product. So, I started experimenting with other merchandise, like hoodies, mugs, and posters. I also began to incorporate more lifestyle-focused designs, things that weren't just funny, but that also resonated with my target audience's values and interests. That's when the business really took off. At this point, I had built a small team to help me with the day-to-day operations. I brought in a graphic designer to create more polished designs, a customer service representative to handle inquiries, and an operations manager to help streamline our fulfillment process. The business was growing faster than I could have imagined, and I felt like I was finally on the right track. But just as things were going well, the pandemic hit. I'll admit, I was terrified. The economy was uncertain, and people weren't spending money the way they had before. I wasn't sure if my business would survive. But instead of shrinking back, I decided to double down. I focused on providing value to my customers by offering free shipping, running flash sales, and keeping the content on my social media channels engaging. I also launched a new line of products focused on home life, which resonated with people who were stuck indoors. It wasn't easy, but it worked. Sales didn't just hold steady, they actually grew. By the end of 2020, my business had hit its first seven-figure revenue year. It was surreal to think about. I had gone from a broke, 24-year-old with no idea how to start a business to running $1 million company. Now, I travel the world, speaking at conferences and mentoring other entrepreneurs who are just starting out. I still have a long way to go, but I'm proud of how far I've come. The road wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but the one thing that kept me going was the belief that if I kept working hard and learning from my mistakes, I would eventually get there. If there's one piece of advice I can offer anyone who's thinking about starting their own business, it's this: don't be afraid to start small. Don't be afraid to fail. The journey won't always be easy, but if you're willing to put in the work, you can build something amazing. Success isn't about being perfect from day one. It's about having the resilience to keep going, even when it feels like you're not getting anywhere. I never thought I would be where I am today. Honestly, there were times I was just surviving, not even thriving. If you had asked me 5 years ago what my life would look like, I would have said something like, I'll be working in a regular job, maybe saving up for a house, possibly even settling into a routine. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. It all started when I graduated from college. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I didn't want to work for someone else for the rest of my life. I had always been drawn to entrepreneurship, but I didn't have the resources or a clear path to start. I worked a few odd jobs, saved some money, and after about a year, I realized that if I didn't take a risk soon, I'd end up stuck in a job I hated forever. I decided to take the plunge and start an online store selling custom t-shirts. The idea came to me one night when I was brainstorming. I saw all these different types of shirts online, but nothing really spoke to me. So I thought, why not create a brand that speaks to the people who are just like me, those who want something unique? I went online, set up a Shopify account, and started designing. I knew nothing about graphic design, but there were plenty of free tools to help me out. At first, it felt like a hobby. I spent hours researching t-shirt printing methods, designing logos, and learning about e-commerce. But the sales? Well, they were non-existent. For the first few months, I was lucky if I got a single order a week. I kept hearing about how businesses succeed by scaling fast, and how most people fail because they give up too early. I wasn't about to be one of those people. So, I started taking real action. I decided to focus on social media. I saw that influencers were making waves in the fashion world, so I thought maybe I could do the same. The only problem was, I didn't know any influencers, and I certainly didn't have the money to pay them. But I didn't let that stop me. I began reaching out to influencers in my niche, people with a few thousand followers who I thought might be willing to collaborate in exchange for free shirts. It was a slow process, but it worked. The first influencer I worked with posted about my shirts, and, to my surprise, it actually led to a few sales. Now, a few sales may not seem like a big deal, but for me, it was huge. I took those sales, reinvested them into ads, and reached out to more influencers. Slowly but surely, my brand started growing. With each sale, I learned more about marketing, design, and what customers were really looking for. The more I sold, the more I realized that the business wasn't just about selling t-shirts. It was about creating a brand that people could connect with. Then, just as things were picking up, disaster struck. A shipment of shirts was delayed by weeks, and my customers were furious. I tried everything to appease them, offering refunds, providing discounts, and sending personal apology messages. But no matter what I did, it seemed like my reputation was shot. For the first time, I seriously thought about quitting. But then I remembered something that had been drilled into my head since I started. The key to success isn't avoiding failure. It's learning how to bounce back from it. So, I put in even more effort. I contacted the suppliers and fixed the issue, offering even better service going forward. It took a while, but I managed to rebuild trust with my customers. Fast forward to 2 years later, and I was finally seeing consistent profits. The business was growing, and I felt like I was on the brink of something big. But, as any entrepreneur will tell you, just when you think things are going smoothly, life throws you a curveball. This time, it wasn't a supplier issue, it was competition. Several bigger players in the t-shirt space started copying my designs. At first, it didn't seem like a huge deal. I figured that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. But as these larger companies gained traction, I started losing customers to them. It was like a punch to the gut, but again, I knew that quitting wasn't an option. I decided to pivot. Instead of trying to compete head-to-head with these companies, I chose to double down on what made my brand unique: the community. I reached out to my most loyal customers and asked them what they wanted to see. They told me they wanted more personalized items, so I launched a line of custom t-shirts where customers could choose their own designs. It was a gamble, but it paid off. The personal connection I built with my customers became a huge selling point. I also started creating limited edition collections, making sure there was always something fresh and exciting to offer. These collections were marketed in a way that made them feel exclusive, which drove demand. Every time I launched a new collection, sales spiked. Things were looking up again, but there was still the challenge of scaling the business. The operational side of things, inventory, shipping, and customer service, was getting more difficult as I grew. I knew I couldn't do everything on my own anymore, so I hired a few key people to help me. I brought on a customer service representative, a marketing specialist, and a logistics manager. This was the first time I had trusted others with parts of the business, and it was a huge relief. I could finally focus on strategy, innovation, and growth. By the time I hit the 5-year mark, my business was no longer just an online store. It was a full-fledged brand with a loyal customer base and a strong presence on social media. I had learned so much along the way about what works and what doesn't, about what people want, and about how to bounce back from failure. Most importantly, I learned that success isn't just about making money. It's about creating something that resonates with people and having the resilience to keep going even when things seem impossible. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. From those early days of making no sales to now being a well-known brand, it feels surreal. There's still so much more I want to accomplish, but for the first time, I'm confident that I can. I used to think that entrepreneurs were just lucky people who had it all figured out, but now I know the truth. Entrepreneurship is about perseverance, learning from mistakes, and adapting to change. It's about the hustle, the grind, and the relentless drive to make your vision a reality. If there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone thinking about starting their own business, it would be this: don't give up when things get tough. The road to success is never smooth, and it's easy to get discouraged. But if you keep pushing forward, if you keep learning and adapting, you'll make it. And when you do, the reward is more than worth the effort. So, here I am, 5 years later. My business is doing well, and I'm now in the process of expanding into new markets. It hasn't been easy, but every challenge along the way has made me stronger. And if I can do it, so can you. Keep going. I had been working at a corporate job for a few years, climbing the ranks, getting promotions, and everything seemed to be going well. I was the typical office worker who believed in the 9-to-5 grind, constantly doing what I was told, and slowly accumulating knowledge about how businesses function. I thought it was all going to lead to a comfortable career, with a secure future ahead. But, in the back of my mind, something kept gnawing at me. Was this all there was? It was a regular Wednesday morning when I got the phone call that changed everything. My boss, a guy I had been working with for almost 4 years, told me that the company was downsizing. Due to some unforeseen financial losses and restructuring, a number of positions, including mine, were being cut. I was stunned. There had been no signs of trouble, and my performance had always been strong. The offer was standard 2-week severance and help finding another job. The words severance and job search were the last things I wanted to hear. I'd never been through a layoff before, and I honestly didn't know how to feel. All I knew was that my comfortable little bubble had just popped. I spent the next few weeks feeling sorry for myself, applying to job after job, trying to find something that would give me the same security I had grown used to. But as I sat there, sending out cover letters and resumes to companies that seemed to offer similar roles, I started to realize something. I had been playing the corporate game for so long that I had forgotten what it was like to do something I truly cared about. It was as if I had been on autopilot for years, and I had completely lost touch with what I was passionate about. It was during this period of soul-searching that I stumbled across a YouTube video about someone who had started a small online business. They were talking about how, with the right idea and a bit of hard work, anyone could build a business from the ground up. At first, I thought it was one of those motivational videos that make big promises but offer little substance. But something about it struck a chord with me. I decided to give it a shot. What did I have to lose? I had already lost my job. I started small, researching different online business models, reading blogs, watching videos, and taking courses. My first idea was to create an online store. I had always been into fitness and health, so I figured I could sell workout equipment and supplements. I spent weeks researching the market, finding suppliers, and setting up an e-commerce platform. I had no prior experience in marketing or sales, but I was determined. After all, what was the worst that could happen? I would fail, just like I had failed at being a corporate employee. The first few months were brutal. I had no sales, no traffic, and a dwindling bank account. I questioned my decision constantly. Was I just another dreamer who would end up failing and going back to a 9-to-5 job? But something kept me going. Every failure, every setback, only fueled my desire to prove that I could succeed on my own terms. Slowly but surely, things started to change. I learned how to run Facebook ads, how to optimize my website, how to work with influencers, and how to build a brand that people trusted. The turning point came when I created a social media campaign featuring a popular fitness influencer. It went viral, and sales spiked. I was ecstatic. But even after the success of that campaign, I knew it wasn't the end. In fact, it was just the beginning. The money started coming in, but I wasn't satisfied with just having an online store. I wanted to build something bigger, something that could stand the test of time. I realized that what I had created was not just a business, it was a brand. I wanted to expand my offerings beyond workout equipment and supplements. I began working on a line of apparel, fitness accessories, and even a line of fitness guides and training programs. I was reinvigorated with the possibility of what my future could hold. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, countless hours of work, and the constant battle of balancing my time between growing the business and handling the personal aspects of life. I faced moments of doubt and frustration, and there were times when I thought I couldn't handle it anymore. But every time I was on the verge of giving up, I remembered how far I had come. I remembered the feeling of being laid off from my job and thinking I had no direction. That feeling had propelled me forward, and it kept me going even when the business seemed like it wasn't growing fast enough. Eventually, my brand gained traction. It was no longer just a small side hustle. It became my full-time job, and with that, I had to hire employees, expand the product line, and focus on scaling. There were challenges with managing a team and ensuring that the company culture stayed true to my vision, but I tackled them head-on. I built a small but passionate team who shared my values and helped me turn my dream into a reality. Fast forward to today, and I'm proud to say that my business has grown into a 7-figure brand with customers all around the world. I'm not rich in the traditional sense. Money doesn't define me anymore, but I'm wealthy in experiences and freedom. I wake up every day excited to work, knowing that I'm creating something meaningful that helps people live healthier lives. I'm no longer chasing promotions or raises at a corporate job. I'm chasing a vision, and that vision is finally coming to life. Looking back, I can't help but laugh at how much I feared failure. Being laid off was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to take a leap of faith, to step into the unknown, and to build something that was truly my own. If I had stayed at that corporate job, I would never have discovered what I was truly capable of. So, if you're stuck in a job that doesn't inspire you, or if you're thinking about making a major career change, take a step back and ask yourself, what's stopping you from chasing your dreams? The road ahead might be uncertain, but it's also full of potential. Sometimes, all it takes is one moment of uncertainty to change your entire life for the better. I always thought success was something that happened to other people, the ones who were born with some magic spark or the right connections. But my story is about how I realized that success is not a random event. It's a process, a result of persistence, timing, and a lot of mistakes along the way. It all began in my small town, where the biggest ambition was to get a stable job and work your way up the corporate ladder. For the longest time, that was my dream too. After finishing college with a degree in marketing, I landed a job at a mid-sized advertising firm. On paper, everything looked perfect. The salary was decent, the benefits were good, and the office was just a short commute from my apartment. I had the kind of job that most people would kill for, but the truth was, I hated every single minute of it. I spent the first few months thinking I was just adjusting, that I needed to give it time. But it became clear that I wasn't happy. I found myself daydreaming at my desk about starting my own business, about being my own boss. I had no idea what kind of business I wanted to run, but I knew I couldn't continue down the path I was on. That's when I started to do the one thing that's so easy to overlook: research. I devoured books, listened to podcasts, watched interviews with entrepreneurs. I tried to understand the mindset that made people successful. What I quickly realized was that every entrepreneur, no matter how successful, had one thing in common: they all started with nothing. They didn't have all the answers. They made mistakes. A lot of mistakes. And most importantly, they didn't give up when things got tough. That realization hit me hard. I wasn't a special snowflake waiting for the perfect idea to come along. I needed to take action. So one evening after work, I sat down with a notebook and began brainstorming. I didn't worry about what the business would be at first. I just wrote down every idea that came to mind. Some were ridiculous, others were far-fetched, but eventually, one idea stuck. It was a simple idea: start an online store selling eco-friendly products. At the time, sustainable living was gaining traction, and I saw an opportunity to tap into that market. The only problem? I didn't have any experience in e-commerce. I didn't know how to create a website, manage inventory, or even ship products. But I didn't let that stop me. I used my nights and weekends to learn everything I could. I taught myself how to build a website, researched suppliers, and figured out how to market the products online. I didn't have a lot of money to start, so I bootstrapped everything. The first website I launched was rough. It was clunky, and the products didn't even look that great in the photos, but I didn't care. I was too excited to see it live. The first sale came after what felt like an eternity, and I remember that feeling so clearly. It was validation that I was on the right track. I made my fair share of mistakes in those early days. I misjudged shipping costs, miscalculated how much inventory I would need, and spent too much money on ads that didn't convert. But every mistake taught me something valuable. I learned how to refine my marketing strategy, optimize my website, and improve my customer service. Slowly but surely, the business started to grow. The turning point came about a year into the business. I had reached a plateau in terms of sales, and I realized I needed to make a big move to take things to the next level. That's when I decided to reach out to influencers in the sustainable living niche. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't have the budget for expensive partnerships, and I was worried they wouldn't respond. But I took the plunge and sent out a few emails, offering to send them free products in exchange for a review. To my surprise, several influencers agreed. They posted about my products on their social media channels, and suddenly, my website traffic skyrocketed. Sales followed, and for the first time, I could see the potential of what I was building. However, the road to success wasn't smooth sailing from there. As the business grew, so did the challenges. Managing inventory became a logistical nightmare, and I had to hire a small team to help with customer service, packing, and shipping. I struggled to keep up with the demands of the business, and at one point, I almost burned out. But here's the thing I learned. When you're an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to delegate. You can't do everything yourself. That was a hard lesson for me because I'm naturally a control freak. But once I hired the right people and trusted them to take on more responsibilities, the business became much more manageable. It wasn't just the operational side that needed attention. I had to constantly innovate and stay ahead of trends. The market for eco-friendly products was becoming more competitive, and I had to find ways to differentiate my brand. That's when I decided to launch a subscription service. Instead of one-time purchases, customers could subscribe to receive eco-friendly products delivered to their door each month. It was a risk, but it paid off. By this time, I had learned so much about e-commerce, branding, and customer loyalty. I began to expand the product line, focusing on unique, high-quality items that weren't widely available. I also invested in better photography and upgraded the website to make the shopping experience smoother. The business began to flourish. Fast forward to today, and I'm running a six-figure business with a small but dedicated team. We've expanded to offer a variety of sustainable products, and the subscription service has become a huge part of our revenue. I'm still learning, still making mistakes, but I've reached a point where I can say that I built something from the ground up. It wasn't easy, and it certainly didn't happen overnight, but it's been the most rewarding experience of my life. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone thinking about starting a business, it would be this: don't wait for the perfect moment to start. You'll never feel ready, and the first step is always the hardest. But if you're persistent, if you learn from your mistakes, and if you keep moving forward even when it feels impossible, you'll get there. The road is long, but it's worth it. As for me, I'm still on the journey. I have bigger goals now, expanding internationally, developing new products, and making an even greater impact in the sustainability space. The hustle never stops, but I'm finally in control of my destiny. I may not have been born with the spark I thought I needed, but I created my own. And that's how I went from a bored office worker to a full-time entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for about 8 years now, but my story is far from a traditional rags-to-riches narrative. I've gone through the highs and the lows, and there were definitely times I thought about quitting. Looking back now, it seems crazy that I kept pushing through, but that's the thing about entrepreneurship. You never really know if you're going to make it until you're standing on the other side. I started out like most entrepreneurs, with a small idea. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but I thought it had potential. I had been working in marketing for about 5 years, and I realized there was a big gap in the way small businesses were reaching their customers. Everyone was talking about SEO, content, and social media, but I saw so many businesses struggling to put it all together. I figured if I could create a company that helped small businesses with marketing strategy, I could help them grow in a meaningful way. At the time, it seemed like a no-brainer. So, I left my steady job and put all my savings into it. The first year was brutal. I thought that just because I had an idea and a small network, I would get clients left and right. Instead, I spent almost every day cold calling, emailing, and trying to get people to see the value in my services. I barely made enough to cover my expenses, and my savings started to dwindle. There were days when I didn't know how I was going to pay rent, let alone keep the business running. In the beginning, I was doing everything myself: client acquisition, content creation, social media management, project management, everything. There were days when I'd work 16-hour shifts, trying to juggle it all, and still feel like I wasn't getting anywhere. But I kept telling myself that if I just kept grinding, something would eventually give. I even read all the typical motivational books, the ones that tell you to never give up and stay consistent. It was easy to believe that success was just a matter of time. Then, after about a year of constant hustle and minimal results, something happened. I had a potential client call me out of the blue. They were a small e-commerce brand that had been struggling to grow their online presence. They wanted to try something different, and after a few meetings, they agreed to sign on as a client. I was ecstatic. Finally, a big break. The only problem was, I didn't really know how to deliver on the promises I had made. I had been working alone, so I didn't have a team to help execute. But I didn't want to lose the opportunity, so I started scrambling. I spent the next several weeks working around the clock, creating campaigns, analyzing data, and just trying to make the most of the opportunity. I'm not going to lie, there were moments when I thought I was going to fail. But after about a month of intense work, we started seeing some traction. Their sales started increasing, their website traffic went up, and most importantly, they were happy with the work we were doing. That was a turning point. They referred me to 2 other businesses, and just like that, my company had a bit of momentum. Even though I had my first big client, things didn't get easier right away. The pressure of delivering high-quality work for multiple clients was immense. I knew I couldn't keep up with the workload by myself, so I began hiring people. It started with a freelance content writer, then a designer, and eventually, I brought on a project manager. The team slowly grew, and as we gained more clients, the stakes got higher. Each new project was an opportunity to prove ourselves, but with each success came more stress and the constant fear that I might let someone down. I learned some hard lessons in those early days. For one, I realized that having a great team was crucial. I had always thought that being an entrepreneur meant doing everything myself, but the reality is that you can't scale alone. I had to trust people to take ownership of their roles and learn to delegate, which was one of the hardest things I had to do. But once I started doing that, the business began to grow faster than I had imagined. Over the next few years, my company started to gain real traction. We were landing bigger clients, getting recognized in our industry, and my team was growing. But, as with every entrepreneur, there were still struggles. Competition was fierce, and there were times when I doubted my ability to keep up with the demands of the business. I had moments of burnout, and I honestly considered throwing in the towel a few times. But what I didn't realize then was that those moments of doubt were part of the journey. Every setback, every failure, every sleepless night was shaping me into a better entrepreneur. I began to understand that the road to success wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about learning how to pick yourself up and keep going, no matter how hard it got. I also realized that the people around me, my team, mentors, and even clients, were just as important as the idea itself. I finally reached a point where my company was stable. We had a solid client base, a team that worked well together, and a workflow that allowed us to operate efficiently. But here's the thing. That stability didn't come from a single breakthrough or lucky break. It came from years of hard work, constant adaptation, and the willingness to embrace failure when it happened. Today, my business has grown into a much larger agency, and I've reached a point where I can step back a little more and focus on strategy and growth. We're still expanding, and I'm constantly working to improve our processes and stay ahead of the competition. But I can honestly say that the hardest part of being an entrepreneur wasn't the long hours or the struggles with cash flow. It was the mental toll of constantly questioning myself and wondering if I was doing the right thing. But with each success, I got a little more confident in my abilities and learned to trust the process. So, for anyone out there who's struggling or thinking about quitting, I want you to know this. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be days when you want to give up. But if you're passionate about what you're doing and you're willing to put in the work, you can make it. The key is to keep going, keep learning, and never stop believing in yourself, even when it seems impossible. That's what being an entrepreneur is all about. It's not the smooth ride that people make it seem. It's messy, unpredictable, and full of unexpected turns. But at the end of the day, it's worth it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I was 24 years old when I decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship. To most people, I seemed like a typical college grad, fresh out of a mediocre university with a degree in business administration. But what they didn't know was that I had been dreaming of building my own company for years. The idea started small, a tech startup, something that could bring a product to life that would make people's lives easier. The problem? I had no real idea how to start. I'd worked a couple of corporate jobs during college summers, but nothing I'd done in those positions really prepared me for the chaos and unpredictability of entrepreneurship. However, my desire to build something real out of nothing was a burning passion, and I was determined to make it happen. It all started with a rough idea, a mobile app that would help people streamline their daily tasks, prioritize their to-do lists, and ultimately become more productive. Simple enough, right? In my head, it sounded like a game changer. I thought it could go viral. I envisioned millions of downloads, businesses using it, and me sitting on a beach somewhere, raking in the profits. Looking back, it sounds a little naive, but that's where I was. I went to work researching. I spent nights studying programming languages, watching YouTube tutorials, reading books, and attending local tech meetups. I was adamant about building this app by myself without hiring anyone for the tech side, thinking I could save money and own 100% of the project. What I didn't account for was how much time and effort it would take to actually make a usable product. But, as they say, ignorance is bliss. For the next year, I coded and tinkered with the app in my free time. Every day after my job, I'd come home exhausted but motivated to make progress. After countless late nights, I finally had something that resembled a functioning prototype. It wasn't much. The app could add tasks to a list, prioritize them, and set reminders. But in my eyes, it was revolutionary. That's when reality hit me. I had no marketing experience. I had no money to pay for ads. And I had no idea how to get people to actually download my app. For months, I focused on refining the product, but I neglected everything else. My tiny savings were running out, and my enthusiasm started to wane. Still, I didn't give up. I had to keep going, I told myself. There was no turning back now. Eventually, I reached out to a couple of friends who were designers and had experience in the app development world. They agreed to help me refine the user interface and design a polished version of the app. With their help, the app finally looked like something professional. But there was still one huge issue. How would I get people to use it? I tried everything. I posted in Reddit communities, Facebook groups, and on forums, desperately trying to get some traction. I didn't have money to hire influencers or run Facebook ads, so I relied on word of mouth. I spent countless hours reaching out to bloggers, tech reviewers, and even people I didn't know, hoping they would give me a shot and review my app. And after months of hard work, I finally had my first major breakthrough. A small tech blog picked up my app and wrote a glowing review. That review led to a second, which led to more reviews and mentions in other blogs. Slowly, people started to download the app. It wasn't a viral sensation, but it was something. Over the next few months, the app began to grow, and I started to get feedback from users. Some of it was positive, some of it was brutal, but all of it was invaluable. I spent the next year iterating on the app, fixing bugs, and adding new features based on user feedback. The process was grueling, but it was also exhilarating. Each small improvement brought more users, and I started seeing a steady stream of revenue from in-app purchases. It wasn't much, but it was enough to convince me that I was on the right track. The next challenge was scaling. By this time, I had saved enough money from the app's revenue to quit my job and focus on the business full-time. I wasn't rich by any means, but I had enough to cover my basic expenses. The decision to quit was terrifying, but it was also empowering. I no longer had to split my time between a 9 to 5 and my dream. I could finally devote all my energy to growing the company. Scaling was another beast entirely. I had no idea how to manage a team, handle finances, or deal with the legal side of running a business. I made a lot of mistakes, some of which cost me both time and money. But each mistake taught me a lesson. I began hiring a small team, a developer to handle the backend, a marketing specialist to help with growth, and a customer support person to handle user feedback. Slowly, we started to build a small but passionate team. As the months passed, the app continued to grow. We reached 100,000 downloads, then 500,000, and eventually, over 1 million. It was surreal. My little startup was finally getting some recognition. The revenue continued to rise, and with it, the pressure to perform. But I loved it. I thrived on the challenge. Every milestone felt like a victory, but I knew the real work was still ahead. Around the 2-year mark, the company was profitable enough for me to bring on more employees and invest in new features. We launched a premium version of the app with more advanced features, which increased our revenue significantly. But there were still many challenges to overcome. Competitors began popping up, and keeping the app fresh and innovative became more difficult. Then came the biggest challenge yet, a data breach. One day, I woke up to find that our servers had been hacked. It was a nightmare. Customer data had been compromised, and the trust we had spent years building was at risk. We had to act fast. My team and I worked around the clock to fix the issue, notify users, and offer compensation to those affected. It was a huge setback, but it also taught me the importance of security and transparency in business. We managed to recover, and the experience made the company stronger. We introduced new security features and improved our customer service. Our user base remained loyal, and over time, we continued to grow. The app became one of the leading productivity tools on the market, and I eventually sold the company for a significant amount of money. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned throughout this journey. Entrepreneurship isn't about having a great idea or instant success. It's about persistence, resilience, and the ability to learn from failure. It's about navigating the ups and downs, making mistakes, and continuing to move forward. Now, I'm working on my next venture. I've made mistakes, and I've learned from them. But I know one thing for sure. I wouldn't trade the experience of building something from the ground up for anything. The lessons I've learned, the people I've met, and the moments of triumph are worth every bit of struggle. This is a story about how I went from being a broke 23-year-old with zero business experience to running a successful e-commerce business that made over $1 million in sales within the first 3 years. It wasn't an overnight success, and there were many failures, but each mistake taught me valuable lessons that ultimately led me to where I am today. A little over 3 years ago, I was working as a server in a local restaurant, just scraping by. I had a degree in marketing, but I wasn't using it. I thought I was supposed to go down the traditional career path, get a job, work your way up the ladder, and retire happily. But I quickly realized that I wasn't made for the 9 to 5 grind. I hated my job. I hated working for someone else. The whole idea of trading my time for money felt wrong. I wanted something more, something that gave me freedom. One night, after another exhausting shift, I went home and started scrolling through Reddit. I came across a post about e-commerce, where a guy shared how he started an online store and made 6 figures in his first year. The post wasn't anything extraordinary, Just a guy talking about how he had no prior business experience, found a niche product, and built a successful online store from scratch. I remember reading that and thinking, if he can do it, why can't I? I had no experience in e-commerce, no idea how to set up a website, and no budget to invest in fancy marketing. But I had something that felt more important at the time, a burning desire to escape my dead-end job and create something for myself. I decided to take the plunge. I started researching everything I could about e-commerce, Shopify, dropshipping, and digital marketing. I spent hours every day after work watching YouTube tutorials and reading blog posts. It was overwhelming, but I didn't let that stop me. I knew it was going to be hard, but I was determined to make it work. I didn't have a ton of money to spend on products or inventory, so I decided to go the dropshipping route. If you're unfamiliar with dropshipping, it's a business model where you don't hold any inventory. When someone orders a product from your store, you buy it from a supplier who ships it directly to the customer. This means you don't have to worry about stock, packaging, or shipping. Your main job is marketing and customer service. I spent weeks setting up my online store. I used Shopify to create my website and picked a niche, fitness products. I'd always been into health and fitness, so it felt like the right fit. I did a lot of market research and found a few trending products that I could sell with good profit margins. I set up some Facebook ads to start driving traffic to my site and prayed that something would happen. At first, nothing did. I spent a lot of money on ads and got only a handful of visitors. The sales didn't come in. I remember feeling so defeated. I had put in so much time and energy, and for what? A couple of clicks on my website and no sales? It was crushing, but I wasn't about to give up. I started tweaking my ads, testing different strategies, and improving my website's layout. I learned about the importance of copywriting and began writing better product descriptions. I used social media to create organic content, and slowly, I started seeing results. The sales didn't come overnight, but after months of trial and error, things began to click. About 6 months into running my store, I made my first $100 in profit in a single day. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was proof that my hard work was starting to pay off. That $100 fueled my motivation to keep going. I took that small win and reinvested it into scaling my business, improving my ads, testing new products, and working on customer retention. Fast forward to the end of my first year. I had gone from making $100 a day to making $1,000 a day in profit. I was still working at the restaurant part-time to pay the bills, but my online store had become my primary focus. I was obsessed with it, obsessed with learning, experimenting, and growing. I learned how to optimize my sales funnel, how to handle customer complaints, and how to improve my ad targeting. I even started outsourcing some of the tasks I didn't enjoy, like customer service and order fulfillment, which allowed me to focus more on scaling. In my second year, things really took off. I hired a virtual assistant to help with customer service, a graphic designer to improve my website and product photos, and a paid advertising expert to help me scale my ad campaigns. I also started building an email list and using email marketing to promote sales and new products. By the end of my second year, my business was generating over $500,000 in revenue. It felt surreal. The dream I had when I was working at the restaurant was now a reality. I had left my part-time job and was running my business full-time. But even though I had hit some big milestones, I still faced challenges. I dealt with difficult customers, product delays, and cash flow issues. There were times when I felt like throwing in the towel, but I kept pushing forward because I knew this was what I wanted to do. Year 3 was the year everything exploded. By now, I had a team working with me. My business was making over $1,000,000 in revenue annually. I had become more comfortable with the entrepreneurial lifestyle, and I finally started to feel like I had a solid foundation. But the road to success was still far from easy. I continued to adapt and innovate, learning from my mistakes and improving every aspect of my business. I branched out into other niches, expanded my product range, and even started building my brand's social media presence. I got better at handling the financial side of things, and I learned how to scale more efficiently. My focus shifted from just making sales to building a sustainable business. Today, I run a thriving e-commerce business with a full-time team. I've moved out of my small apartment and into a house I never thought I'd be able to afford. I travel the world, work from wherever I want, and, most importantly, I have the freedom I always dreamed of. But the journey didn't come without its share of failures. There were countless times when I wanted to quit, when I felt overwhelmed by the constant pressure. But the key to success was persistence, learning from mistakes, and constantly improving. If I can do it, anyone can. Starting a business isn't easy, but it's worth it. If you're thinking about taking the leap, just do it. Don't wait for the perfect moment because it will never come. Start with what you have, learn as you go, and keep pushing forward. You don't need a fancy background or a ton of money to get started. You just need determination, a willingness to fail, and the desire to never give up. I was 26 years old when I decided to take the plunge and quit my steady job as a project manager at a big corporate firm. I had always been one of those people who daydreamed about entrepreneurship, but I was too scared to actually do anything about it. I remember sitting at my desk one day, scrolling through my phone, reading yet another rags to riches story of some guy who started a business in his garage and sold it for millions a few years later. Something clicked in me that day. Why not me? I had no real business experience, just a passion for design and a deep desire to carve my own path. I had always dabbled in small side projects, creating custom artwork for friends, designing t-shirts, and even trying my hand at digital marketing. None of them had turned a significant profit, but I enjoyed the process. After a few years of working in corporate America, I felt suffocated by the endless meetings and strict deadlines. I wanted to be my own boss, create something that mattered, and, if I was lucky, make enough money to live on my own terms. One night, I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning, thinking about what I could do. Then it hit me. I would create an online marketplace for independent designers and artists. The market was already crowded with massive platforms like Etsy and Redbubble, but I felt that there was a gap. None of these platforms really catered to the unique needs of the independent artist. Most of them were too generic or didn't offer enough exposure to small-time creators. At the time, I didn't know the first thing about building an e-commerce platform, but that didn't stop me. I started researching, watching hours of YouTube videos, reading blog posts, and reaching out to anyone who could help me learn the ropes. It was slow at first, but I was determined to figure it out. I put together a business plan, found a cheap website hosting service, and began working on the website in my free time. I had no budget for a fancy developer, so I taught myself basic web development and design. It was grueling. There were nights where I thought I was in over my head, but I kept pushing through. Eventually, after a few months of late nights and a few $100s invested in hosting and tools, I launched the website. It was simple, bare bones even, but it was live. The next step was marketing. Since I had no money to invest in ads, I decided to try and build an organic following. I created social media accounts for the platform and started posting about the artists and designers I admired. I was genuinely passionate about giving them a place to thrive, and that enthusiasm came through in my posts. I reached out to smaller creators and asked them to join the platform, offering them a chance to showcase their work to a larger audience. At first, it felt like a failure. I had a handful of artists join, but traffic to the site was almost non-existent. But I kept grinding, reaching out to artists every day, refining my marketing strategy, and constantly tweaking the website. A few months in, I made my first sale $12. A small win, but it was a win nonetheless. That $12 felt like $1,000 to me. It was proof that the idea could work. However, just when I thought things were starting to click, disaster struck. The website crashed. I hadn't anticipated how quickly my small platform would need to scale, and I didn't have the technical skills to manage the back end of the site. I spent an entire week trying to fix the problem on my own, but nothing worked. I had no choice but to hire a freelance developer to help me out, which cost me a significant portion of my savings. But despite the setback, I kept going. I started offering better incentives for artists, such as lower fees and more promotion through social media. Slowly but surely, more and more creators signed up, and traffic began to climb. I still remember the day I hit my first 1,000 visitors in one day. It was a huge milestone. By the time I turned 30, I was running a small but growing business. I had enough sales to cover the cost of the site, pay myself a modest salary, and even reinvest back into the platform. It wasn't making millions by any means, but it was a start, and I was proud of that. Over the next few years, I continued to improve the platform. I hired a small team to help with customer service, design, and development. We introduced new features, including a commission-free model for certain types of artwork, and improve the overall user experience. Slowly, the brand started gaining traction. Artists who once felt lost on larger platforms began to see success with us, and I made sure to showcase their stories on social media to inspire others. By the time I was 33, things were beginning to really take off. I secured a small round of funding from angel investors who saw the potential in the platform. That money allowed me to hire more staff, expand our marketing efforts, and offer even better tools for our users. It wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It was a real business with employees and a growing customer base. In 2024, after nearly 7 years of hard work and sacrifice, I sold my platform to a much larger e-commerce company. The deal wasn't life-changing in terms of wealth, but it gave me the financial freedom I had always dreamed of. More importantly, it proved that anyone with the right combination of passion, persistence, and adaptability could make their dreams a reality. Looking back, I don't regret quitting my stable job and diving headfirst into entrepreneurship. Sure, there were times when I doubted myself and wanted to give up, but every failure and setback taught me something valuable. The journey was never easy, but it was worth every second. I now mentor young entrepreneurs, hoping to inspire them the way I was inspired years ago. And every time I hear someone tell me that they're too scared to take that first step, I tell them the same thing. If you're passionate and willing to work hard, there's no reason you can't build something amazing. Success doesn't come overnight, but if you stay consistent, the pieces will eventually fall into place. The road may be long, but the destination is always worth it. I remember the first time I heard about dropshipping. I was sitting in a small coffee shop in my hometown, scrolling through Reddit when I stumbled upon a post about someone who made $100,000 in just a few months running an online store. My first thought was, that's impossible. There's no way someone can make that much money so quickly. But the more I read, the more intrigued I became. The idea of building a business without needing a huge upfront investment, without having to hold inventory or deal with the logistics of shipping, sounded almost too good to be true. At the time, I was working a 9-to-5 job in marketing. It wasn't the worst job in the world, but it wasn't what I had envisioned for myself. I hated the office, the daily grind, and feeling like I was just another cog in the machine. I wanted to do something on my own, something that could give me the freedom I longed for. I started looking into dropshipping more seriously, spending my nights watching YouTube tutorials and reading every blog post I could find about how to start an online business. It didn't take long before I decided to give it a shot. I didn't have a lot of money to invest, but I had enough to buy a basic Shopify plan and a few tools to help me get started. The first hurdle I faced was choosing a niche. I knew I didn't want to sell generic products like phone cases or t-shirts. I needed something that would stand out and have a real market demand. After weeks of research, I decided to sell fitness equipment. It seemed like a great niche because people were always looking for ways to stay in shape, and the pandemic had only increased the demand for home gym equipment. The next step was finding a supplier. I went to AliExpress and found a couple of products that I thought would sell well. I set up my Shopify store, designed a simple logo, and spent a few days creating product pages. I launched my store, set up some Facebook ads, and hoped for the best. The first few weeks were brutal. I didn't get a single sale. My ads were barely getting any clicks, and the products I had chosen weren't resonating with the audience I was targeting. I was frustrated, but I didn't give up. I started testing different products, tweaking my ad targeting, and experimenting with different landing pages. Slowly but surely, things started to improve. I made my first sale after about a month of running ads, and it felt like a huge victory. I celebrated, but I knew that this was just the beginning. By the end of my third month, I had made over $5,000 in sales. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a solid start. I could see that my efforts were starting to pay off, and I felt more motivated than ever to keep pushing. But as my sales grew, so did the problems. I had to deal with customer service inquiries, product returns, and supplier issues. My first taste of success quickly turned into stress. I spent hours every day trying to keep up with customer messages, updating my ads, and making sure everything on my store was running smoothly. But despite all the hard work, my business wasn't scaling as quickly as I had hoped. I realized that I couldn't do it all on my own, and that's when I made my first big investment. I hired a virtual assistant to help with customer service. Having someone take over customer service was a game changer. I could finally focus on the bigger picture, optimizing my ads, testing new products, and improving my website. That's when things really started to pick up. Within 6 months of starting, I was making $10,000 in sales every month. But scaling a business comes with its own set of challenges. I found myself dealing with more customer complaints, shipping delays, and product quality issues. There were times when I thought I had made the wrong choice. The amount of stress was overwhelming, and I was afraid that the business would fall apart at any moment. But I stuck with it. I reached out to suppliers to improve my product quality and shipping times, and I started using email marketing to increase sales and improve customer retention. After about a year, I had figured out most of the kinks. I had a solid process in place, a team to help with customer service, and I was able to manage the marketing side of things more efficiently. My revenue started to grow consistently, and I was finally able to quit my day job. It felt surreal to leave the office for the last time and know that I was building my own future. Over the next year, I continued to grow the business. I focused on building a brand, offering exceptional customer service, and finding new ways to drive traffic to my store. I also started branching out into other product categories, which helped diversify my income streams. The more I learned, the more confident I became in my ability to run the business. Now, after 3 years of hard work, I'm running a 7-figure e-commerce business. I've expanded into multiple niches, hired a team of 15 people, and built a brand that's known for quality and customer satisfaction. I've had the opportunity to travel the world and work from wherever I want. Looking back, the journey wasn't easy. There were plenty of moments when I wanted to give up, especially in the beginning when it felt like nothing was working. But I kept pushing through, learning from my mistakes, and staying focused on my goals. If there's one thing I've learned along the way, it's this: success doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, effort, and a willingness to fail. There were times when I felt like I was failing at everything, but those were the moments that pushed me to grow. I still make mistakes today, but I've learned to embrace them as part of the process. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: go for it. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect plan. Just start. Learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. The road to success is rarely straight, but if you're persistent and committed, you'll get there. I've always been someone who saw opportunities where others saw obstacles. Growing up, I wasn't handed much. My parents weren't wealthy, and while they always encouraged me to pursue my dreams, they didn't have the financial means to support me beyond the basics. I've always believed that success didn't come from what you were born with, but from how much effort you were willing to put in. This mindset pushed me to seek out ways to make money as a teenager, and eventually, it became the cornerstone of my entrepreneurial journey. The first taste of entrepreneurship came in high school when I started a small lawn care business. I was 15, and all I had was a push mower and a rusty old truck my grandfather gave me. I started by knocking on doors in my neighborhood offering to mow lawns for $20 each. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid off. Over the next few months, I slowly built up a regular client base, and by the end of my first year, I was making enough money to pay for my car insurance and even save a little on the side. It wasn't much, but it showed me how I could make money without relying on a traditional job. When I graduated high school, I had bigger dreams. I enrolled in college with the goal of getting a business degree, but even then, I knew the traditional path might not be the right one for me. I was eager to start something bigger. My real journey began when I dropped out of college after my second year. I know it sounds like the beginning of a cliché story, but for me, it was the best decision I could have made. During my time in college, I was working part-time in a local coffee shop. It was a decent job, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't doing what I was meant to do. One day, while working the morning shift, I noticed that the coffee shop was struggling to attract customers. The owner was a nice guy, but his shop lacked the energy and appeal of some of the newer places in town. I casually mentioned to him that he should think about introducing more unique coffee flavors or even special promotions. He laughed it off, saying, "If people want coffee, they'll come." I disagreed. I could see that the market was shifting, and I realized that the business needed something more. That's when the idea for my first real business started brewing, pun intended. Instead of just sticking around and being frustrated by the situation, I decided to take action. I started looking for ways to combine my love for coffee with my entrepreneurial drive. After months of researching the industry, I discovered that the specialty coffee market was rapidly growing. People were willing to pay a premium for high-quality, unique brews. I realized that there was a niche in the market for a coffee shop that focused on both great coffee and a unique customer experience. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I didn't have much money, and starting a coffee shop wasn't a cheap venture. I had just enough saved up from my lawn care business and a couple of part-time jobs to cover some initial expenses, but it wasn't going to be nearly enough. That's when I turned to crowdfunding. It felt like a long shot, but I was determined. I created a campaign that described my vision, a coffee shop that wasn't just about the coffee, but about creating an experience. I offered everything from premium brews to unique, artisanal pastries. I promised to build a space where people could escape from their busy lives, relax, and savor the best coffee they'd ever had. To my surprise, the campaign took off. People from all over the country were donating, excited by the idea of a coffee shop that prioritized quality and experience over quantity. Within a month, I raised enough to cover the cost of opening the shop. But that was just the beginning of the challenge. I had to find the right location, hire the right team, and create a brand that resonated with customers. I spent the next 6 months hustling. I worked day and night to build everything from the ground up, often doing everything myself, painting the walls, setting up the equipment, designing the website. I was living on caffeine and sheer determination. When the day finally arrived to open the doors, I was both nervous and excited. I had poured everything into this business, and there was no going back. The first week was tough. Business was slow, and it felt like I had made a huge mistake. But I stuck with it, refining my marketing efforts and focusing on delivering the best possible customer experience. Slowly but surely, the word started to spread. Customers began coming in not just for the coffee, but for the atmosphere, for the community we had built around the shop. I'll never forget the first time we hit our break-even point. I had been working 18-hour days for months, struggling to keep everything afloat. But one Saturday morning, we had a line out the door. That was when I knew I was on the right path. From that point on, things took off. I reinvested every penny back into the business to open more locations, improve our products, and create an even better experience for customers. We were constantly innovating, experimenting with new drinks, and collaborating with local artists and musicians to make our spaces feel alive. Fast forward a few years, and my small coffee shop has grown into a chain of locations across the city. We've expanded into online sales, offering our premium coffee beans and merchandise. My company has become known not only for its exceptional coffee, but for its commitment to sustainability and ethical sourcing. We've built a strong brand that customers trust and love. But as I look back, I realize that the success of my business didn't come from the product itself. It came from understanding people, what they needed, what they wanted, and how to deliver it in a way that resonated with them. I'm not where I want to be yet. I have big plans for the future, and I'm always looking for the next opportunity. I've learned that being an entrepreneur isn't just about starting businesses. It's about creating value for others. Whether it's a coffee shop or a new tech venture, the key to success is understanding your customers and constantly evolving. When people ask me for advice, I tell them the same thing. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Start where you are, with what you have. It's not going to be easy, and there will be setbacks. But if you keep pushing forward, you'll create something that not only changes your life, but the lives of others too. Now, I'm not just an entrepreneur. I'm a mentor, a community builder, and someone who truly believes that with hard work and passion, anyone can create something great. I've learned that success isn't just about making money. It's about making an impact. And that's exactly what I plan to do for the rest of my life. I've always been the kind of person who believed in the get-rich-quick schemes, the ones you see advertised on social media or read about in viral blog posts. It seemed like everyone was out there making millions online, while I was stuck working a job that drained my soul day after day. That was until I decided to take the plunge into the world of entrepreneurship. But let me tell you, the path was nothing like what I imagined. A few years ago, I found myself working as an account manager at a mid-sized marketing firm. On paper, it seemed like the kind of job I should have been happy with. Good salary, decent benefits, and the chance for promotion. But every morning, I'd find myself staring at the clock, waiting for the day to end. I felt trapped. I didn't want to be just another cog in the wheel. I wanted something more, something that I could call my own. I spent my nights researching how to start a business. I consumed content on YouTube, joined entrepreneurship forums, and read book after book on how to build a successful online business. It all seemed so simple in theory. Start a website, market it well, and watch the money roll in. Of course, I quickly realized how naive I had been. After months of research and planning, I decided to start an e-commerce store. I didn't have a lot of money to invest, but I was determined to make it work. I took out a small loan and bought a basic Shopify plan. My goal was simple: sell products that people would actually want to buy. I decided to focus on a niche I was passionate about: sustainable products. From reusable water bottles to eco-friendly tote bags, I wanted to offer products that would appeal to people who cared about the environment. I launched my store and waited for the sales to start rolling in. I thought it would be as easy as running a few Facebook ads, targeting the right audience, and then sitting back while the cash flowed in. But after 2 weeks, I had made exactly 0 sales. My ads were being seen by hundreds of people, but nobody was clicking, and worse, nobody was buying. I was crushed. At first, I blamed the products. Maybe they weren't what people wanted. So, I changed them. I updated my website, made the images more appealing, and tweaked my ad targeting. Still nothing. I spent more money on ads, trying to fine-tune my strategy. Each day felt like a step backward. I was losing money faster than I could make it. I started doubting myself. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I should just go back to my 9-to-5 job. But I couldn't let go. I had invested too much time, money, and energy into this business to just quit. I realized I needed to treat this like a real business, not some side hustle that could magically generate income. So, I got serious about learning the craft. I reached out to other entrepreneurs, watched case studies, and read success stories about people who had built profitable businesses from scratch. I learned about the importance of email marketing, building customer trust, and creating a brand. Slowly but surely, things started to click. After months of tweaking my business, I made my first sale. I remember the moment like it was yesterday, seeing that cha-ching sound on my phone, letting me know someone had bought a product. It wasn't a huge sale, but to me, it was a victory. It was proof that I could make this work. From there, things started to slowly improve. I focused on building a loyal customer base, creating content that resonated with my audience, and leveraging social media to drive traffic. However, I quickly realized that scaling an e-commerce business wasn't as easy as just making sales. I needed to streamline my processes and find ways to handle increasing orders. This is where I made my next big move. I hired a virtual assistant to help with customer service. Hiring someone was scary at first. I had never managed a team before, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to afford it. But it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. My assistant helped me stay organized, respond to customers quickly, and focus on growing the business. As the months went on, I scaled my business to the point where I was making $10,000 in sales every month. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but I was finally starting to see the fruits of my labor. I expanded my product range, built a more robust website, and invested in paid advertising. Eventually, I started seeing a steady stream of sales, and my confidence grew. But even with success, there were still obstacles to overcome. I had to deal with suppliers who couldn't keep up with demand, occasional product quality issues, and even shipping delays. I spent hours every week communicating with suppliers and figuring out ways to keep my customers happy. It was exhausting, but I knew I had to keep pushing forward. One of the biggest lessons I learned during this time was the importance of pivoting when things weren't working. In the beginning, I was so focused on selling eco-friendly products that I ignored other opportunities. I eventually decided to test out selling pet products, and it turned out to be a goldmine. People love buying things for their pets, and it quickly became one of my top-selling categories. This shift allowed me to broaden my audience and increase my revenue. By the time I reached the 2-year mark, I had hit 6 figures in revenue. It was surreal to think about how far I had come. From struggling to make a sale to running a business that was generating significant income. But even with the success, I knew that I couldn't stop. I continued to invest in learning new strategies, optimizing my operations, and experimenting with new products. The work never stopped, but I found myself enjoying the grind. Fast forward to today, and I'm running a 7-figure business. I've hired a team, expanded into international markets, and created a brand that people trust. It's been an incredible journey, but it's also been a roller coaster. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wanted to give up, but I kept pushing through. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, and it certainly isn't glamorous, but the rewards are worth the struggle. If there's one thing I can tell you, it's this: don't expect success to happen overnight. It's easy to look at successful entrepreneurs and think they had it easy, but most of them had to fail before they could succeed. If you're starting out, be patient. Be persistent. And most importantly, don't be afraid to fail. because failure is just a stepping stone to success. My journey as an entrepreneur began in a small, cluttered apartment in a city that barely noticed me. It wasn't the kind of start people would expect from someone who would eventually grow a thriving business. There were no fancy offices, no big investors, and definitely no glamorous tech meetups. There was just me, my laptop, a few $1,000s in savings, and a mountain of self-doubt. I was in my late 20s, fresh out of college, and absolutely clueless about what I wanted to do with my life. I had graduated with a degree in marketing, but it felt like the world was passing me by. I worked odd jobs here and there, trying to make ends meet, but nothing seemed to click. I knew I had potential, but it was locked away, buried under a pile of uncertainty and fear. Then one day, while scrolling mindlessly through social media, I stumbled upon a post about dropshipping. It sounded too good to be true, but something about it intrigued me. The idea that I could sell products online without having to handle inventory seemed like a dream come true. I was living paycheck to paycheck, and the thought of building an online business that could potentially replace my job was a beacon of hope. At first, it was overwhelming. I dove headfirst into research, reading blogs, watching YouTube videos, and joining Facebook groups filled with other aspiring entrepreneurs. I spent hours figuring out how to create a website, how to find reliable suppliers, and how to market my products. It felt like I was in over my head, but I was determined to make it work. I decided to start small. I picked a niche, custom phone accessories. It seemed simple enough, and I figured it would appeal to a wide audience. I set up a Shopify store, chose a few products, and spent what little money I had on Facebook ads. I felt a rush of excitement as I launched the site, but deep down, I feared it was going to fail before it even had a chance. For the first week, nothing happened. I didn't get a single sale. The ads I'd created seemed to be completely ignored. I spent hours tweaking the website, adjusting the pricing, and trying to improve the product descriptions. I had no idea what I was doing, but I couldn't give up. I had come this far, and failure wasn't an option. I reached out to other entrepreneurs in the dropshipping community, desperate for advice. One person suggested I improve my ad targeting. Another recommended I offer a discount to my first few customers. I took all the advice I could get and kept tweaking my store and my marketing strategies. Eventually, after about 3 weeks, something clicked. I got my first sale. It was a small order, but to me, it was the most significant moment of my entrepreneurial journey. Someone, a complete stranger, trusted me enough to buy something from my website. I felt a sense of pride and excitement, but also a bit of disbelief. Could this be the start of something real? I kept pushing forward. Over the next few months, I made countless mistakes, learned more than I ever thought possible, and slowly started seeing more consistent sales. I expanded my product range, refined my ad campaigns, and worked hard to optimize the website for a better customer experience. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt completely burnt out, but I kept reminding myself why I was doing this. I wasn't just building a business. I was building a life for myself that didn't depend on someone else's rules or paycheck. 6 months in, I was making enough money to quit my part-time job. It wasn't a huge income, but it was enough to give me the freedom I had been craving. I remember the day I handed in my resignation letter. It felt surreal. The sense of relief was overwhelming, but so was the fear. I was fully responsible now. There was no safety net, no backup plan. It was all on me. As the months passed, my business grew. I invested in better tools, hired a virtual assistant to help with customer service, and even started to experiment with influencer marketing. But growth brought its own challenges. There were supply chain issues, competition that undercut my prices, and the constant pressure to stay ahead of the curve. I quickly learned that running a business wasn't just about making sales. It was about surviving in an ever-changing market. At one point, I faced a serious setback. My supplier had a major delay, and I was forced to cancel orders for several customers. The angry emails and negative reviews started piling up. It was a tough few weeks, and I seriously considered giving up. I was overwhelmed and frustrated. But then I remembered the first sale, the one that proved it was possible. If I had made it that far, I could make it through this too. I handled the situation by being transparent with my customers, offering refunds or discounts, and making sure to never repeat the same mistake. It was a humbling experience, but it taught me the importance of customer service and the power of honesty. From that point forward, I was more careful with my supply chain and made sure to communicate clearly with my customers. A year after I quit my job, I had a thriving business. My store was doing 6 figures in revenue annually, and I had built a brand that customers trusted. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but I had learned the most important lesson of all. Success is a result of perseverance, not perfection. Looking back now, I can't believe how far I've come. The journey wasn't without its struggles. There were many late nights, countless failures, and moments of doubt. But every challenge was a stepping stone toward where I am today. I'm proud of what I've built, but more importantly, I'm proud of the person I've become. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It requires grit, determination, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. But if you have the drive to succeed and are willing to put in the hard work, it can change your life in ways you never imagined. I never would have thought that my little side hustle would grow into a full-fledged business, but here I am, proof that with the right mindset and a lot of hustle, anything is possible. Now, I'm in the process of scaling even further. I've started offering digital products, expanding my marketing efforts, and hiring a small team to help me manage the workload. The future is still uncertain, but I know one thing for sure. I'm never going back to a 9-to-5 job. So, if you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Start small, stay consistent, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. The road ahead will be tough, but if you can push through the challenges, the rewards are worth it. Entrepreneurship isn't about luck, it's about relentless pursuit of your goals, and sometimes, just holding on long enough to see the fruit of your labor. I want to share the story of how I went from working a dead-end job, living paycheck to paycheck, to running my own 6-figure business. This is not a get-rich-quick tale. It's a story of determination, failure, and hard work. It all started back in 2017. I was 28 years old, working as a customer service representative at a small call center. To most people, it seemed like a decent job, and on paper, it was. But I hated it. I hated the monotony, the lack of control over my life, and the feeling that I was simply working to help someone else achieve their goals. I knew there had to be more to life than this. I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. As a kid, I was the one selling lemonade, organizing garage sales, and making small crafts to sell at school. But as I got older, the dream of starting my own business seemed impossible. I didn't have a college degree, I didn't come from a wealthy family, and I didn't have any connections. I thought to myself, people like me don't start businesses. But I didn't let those thoughts stop me. In 2017, I started researching online business ideas. I spent my nights watching YouTube videos, reading blog posts, and listening to podcasts. After countless hours of research, I decided that I would try my hand at dropshipping. The idea was simple: sell products without holding inventory. The supplier would ship the products directly to the customer. In theory, it sounded like the perfect business model. I remember the first time I decided to take the plunge. I took out my credit card and invested about $500 into setting up a Shopify store. I picked a niche, outdoor gear, and found a supplier that would send products directly to customers. I built my website using a template and made a few basic ads on Facebook. With little experience and even less confidence, I launched my store, hoping to see some immediate success. I waited, and waited, and waited. Nothing happened. A few weeks later, I had spent almost all of the $500 I had invested, and I was nowhere near making a sale. The Facebook ads weren't converting, the website wasn't getting traffic, and I was starting to feel like a failure. I thought about quitting, but then something clicked. I realized that if I quit now, I would never know what it felt like to run a successful business. I refused to let this be my story. I spent the next several months learning everything I could. I took courses on Facebook advertising, branding, and digital marketing. I spent countless hours tweaking my website, improving my product descriptions, and refining my ad targeting. Slowly but surely, my ads started to get more clicks. And then, one day, it happened. Someone bought a product. It wasn't much, but that sale felt like the biggest victory of my life. It was proof that I could do this. But I didn't stop there. I kept testing new products, tweaking my marketing strategies, and learning from my mistakes. Over the course of the next few months, sales started to trickle in more consistently. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, upgrading my website, expanding my product line, and increasing my ad spend. By 2018, I was making about $5,000 a month in revenue. It wasn't enough to quit my job, but it was enough to make me believe that I could make this work full-time. I was still working at the call center during the day, but I was pouring every spare moment I had into my business. I spent nights creating content, running ads, and managing customer service. It was exhausting, but it was also exciting. I was building something from scratch. In late 2018, I took a risk. I decided to quit my job and pursue my business full-time. The fear of uncertainty was overwhelming, but I knew that if I didn't take this chance, I would always wonder what could have been. So, I said goodbye to the safety net of my paycheck and jumped headfirst into entrepreneurship. The first few months were tough. I had no steady income, and every sale felt like a small victory. There were days when I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills, but I kept pushing forward. I took on freelance work to make ends meet, and I used every spare dollar to grow my business. Slowly but surely, things started to pick up. I started seeing real profits. By mid-2019, my business was generating over $10,000 a month in revenue. I was finally able to pay myself a salary, and things were starting to feel sustainable. I expanded into new niches, tested new products, and focused on building a brand that people could trust. I also hired my first virtual assistant to help with customer service, which allowed me to focus more on scaling the business. The most important lesson I learned during this time was the power of persistence. There were times when I wanted to give up. There were moments of self-doubt, moments when I questioned if I was cut out for this. But I kept going. Every failure was a lesson. Every mistake was an opportunity to learn and grow. By 2020, my business had grown to the point where I was making over $50,000 a month in revenue. I had a team of employees, including marketers, designers, and customer support agents. I was able to travel, take time off, and live a life that I had only dreamed of just a few years before. My business had become a legitimate success, but it hadn't come easy. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, here's what I want you to know. It's not going to be easy. You will fail. You will struggle. But if you're persistent, if you're willing to learn, and if you're willing to take risks, success will come. I didn't have a magic formula. I didn't have connections or a degree. All I had was determination and a willingness to learn. And that's what got me here. I'm not done yet. My business is still growing, and I'm still learning. But I want you to understand that no matter where you start, if you have the drive, you can make it happen. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.